Hi Alice, welcome to another episode of Mental Injustice. Today we've got Dobby, Whippet and Hannah. How you doing, Hannah?
Yeah, I'm really good, thank you. Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
You're welcome.
If you just want to give a little background to yourself and Dobby and what you do.
So I live in London. I work in fitness, currently training to be an instructor, but at the moment just working front of house. Originally from Manchester, studied fashion design, decided that was not a good path for me to be on. And kind of, fumbled around for a bit, deciding what I wanted to do. And then, fell into the sort of fitness industry where I thought this is going to be good.
Recently or?
Yeah, probably about a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
I think that's when I decided that was something that I actually really enjoyed. Like going to the gym and stuff was a big part of my life. It was a good place for me to go and escape. So I thought, I was like, this could be something that could be turned into a career. And then in terms of little Dobby, we got him 3.5 years ago. Me and my boyfriend. He is our child. He was a massive help just with a lot of the things that I had going on. So getting me out of the house, giving me some responsibility, gave me a lot of confidence as well. It's a great conversation starter.
Yeah.
I've struggled in the past with sort of social situations. Now that we've got Dobby, he comes most places with us, and just makes me far more comfortable.
Puts you at ease.
Yeah, definitely. He's definitely sort of my own little therapy dog.
Yeah.
Which is great, and I cannot imagine not having a dog now. It would, even just in the house when he's not there, I'm like, it's so strange not having a skinny little thing
running around,
pottering around. That's kind of me at the moment. Yeah. And
then I suppose that leads me on to your work. Essentially, is why we kind of networked. Is in prisons with Dobby and sort of what do you do? What does Dobby do? Obviously, you say he's a therapy dog for yourself and helps. How does he help the men, and what got you into the prison in the first place, I suppose?
So I think a big sort of starting point for me was I've spent sort of my early to mid-20s was spent sort of a bit of a revolving door going in and out of a psychiatric hospital.
Yeah.
To start off with, on my first sort of few admissions, we didn't have Dobby. But when we did get him, and there were more sort of the admissions kind of kept happening, the best sort of times, or the times that I would really look forward to, when my boyfriend would bring Dobby to the hospital.
Yeah.
And I could see him, and obviously it's great to see my boyfriend as well. But
add that bit in. Speaking of doing that bit
that's
in.
That's a bonus.
Yeah.
But for Dobby to come in and to see Dobby, and if I was allowed out, just to be able to go for a walk with him, and other patients would see him as well, and everyone sort of loved that.
So everyone looked forward to it, essentially.
Yeah. So I knew that once I was out of hospital and once I was in a better place myself, that I thought, is there something that I can do with Dobby that would benefit other people as well?
It's amazing.
So I found this charity called Pets as Therapy, and they're like a nationwide charity, and you basically sort of sign yourself up as a volunteer. Mm-hmm. Your dog goes through just like a little behavioural assessment, just to make sure they're not like
a lunatic,
savage beast.
Yeah.
And then from there you can sort of choose where you want to go. So a lot of people go to primary schools, hospitals, care homes. Basically, so many places are signed up to the charity that want someone to go and visit.
Yeah.
And I was kind of looking around my area, what could be beneficial. And there was a prison that was sort of signed up to it. And I thought this could be interesting. So I got in touch with them, And straight away it was like, yeah, amazing, this sounds great, like, come in, see what the plan is. So we kind of just went from there. And he goes in, we spend a bit of time in a few different areas of the prison. Just with the men that the psychology team think would like benefit from it the most. And, you know, to start off with, a lot of the men were a bit sort of sceptical about him. Like, they'd be like, is he a sniffer dog? Because obviously, the only dogs that you get in prison are...
They think there's an ulterior motive going on.
Well, this was the thing. They were like, is he a sniffer dog? I'm like, he's wearing a turtleneck. He's wearing his little yellow onesies. He's like the least threatening dog. But it took a while for people to realise that I didn't have like some ulterior motive. And Dobby's like formed some really good relationships with some of the men in there. And I think the men, a lot of them have staffies, XL bullies, like
typical
big dogs. And now like they've got Dobby, who's just like this skinny little noodle. And seeing them interact with him is just so nice. And especially now, like, Dobby's just gotten more and more comfortable. You know, he's in and out of cells, he's seeing what food he can find.
Does he know who's who? Does he look forward to seeing certain prisoners?
Yeah, definitely. So one thing with Dobby, like, if there's a big group of people, he'll latch on to someone. Like, whatever the situation is, he'll find someone and that's going to be his, like, guardian. And he did that as soon as he started in the prison. There was one man who was showing quite a lot of interest in Dobbs, and I think Dobby was just like, yeah, you're my man. So every week that we go in now, it's like...
Go to see him.
Let's find him. And if he's not there immediately, he'll be like weaving in and out of the cells, trying to find this one guy. And then there's all the other men as well that... You know, some of them haven't had dogs before or are a little bit just sort of nervous around them. And it's just been really nice for them to see them, like, gain a bit more confidence around him and stuff. And what's quite nice is a lot of the men that we work with, some of them have sort of sensory issues or, you know, problems with having, like, their space invaded or... having people close to them or connections like that.
Autism as well.
So like there's autism, like sensory overload, like ADHD, just things that have made sort of gaining those sort of like relationships and stuff quite difficult. But now, like when Dobby comes in, you know, they'll be scooping him up, they'll be carrying him around.
It changes them.
And we've had some really good feedback from the men. You know, they look forward to seeing Dobby. Like when Dobby comes in, it's really helped them with their emotions. Like they look forward to it. And as well, you know, it is almost like not a privilege that he comes in, but I think a lot of them know that if they misbehave or something, that might get taken away from
100%.
them.
Oh, I can talk from my experience. That doesn't happen in prison. Not when I was there. So definitely, I think anything like that is definitely always taken away. So I think if it influences someone's behaviour or gives them a reason not to kick off, and they've got that in their back of their mind, it has to be a positive.
I think, like, you know, with the guy that Dobby's like infatuated with, for a brief moment he was moved wing because of behaviour, and he was still asking the guard, like, do I still get to see Dobby on a Tuesday? And he was like, well, no, like, you've moved wing now because of behaviour. But then he came back, and again, it's just like, I think it's kept a lot of the men sort of kept their behaviour sort of better, just because it's something they look forward to.
I think we all behave better, even not even just in a prison environment, but with reward. I think prison tends to be trying to make you behave through punishment. And I don't think it will. I'm pretty sure you probably... No, it doesn't work that way. And even when you train dogs, you do it through reward. Not saying comparing us to dogs, but I know in prison it was always like, if you do that, we're going to punish you. Not here's something to look forward to, or here's something to work towards, and you can get this.
Like there needs to be some sort of like motivation
100%.
behind it.
Yeah, 100%.
And yeah, it's nice that, you know, Dobby can be that motivation.
Yeah, 100%.
And, you know, I get, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, what you're doing is like a great thing and stuff, but it also it's massively benefited me too. Yeah. So I know that it's helping like the men and stuff.
Yeah, firsthand, you know.
But it's also helped me massively, and it's also taught me a lot, like about, you know, the prison system and stuff and what goes on. Like I was very sort of naive about it all before. You know, you hear of prison and you think, right, prison, that's where bad people go or whatever. But
can I ask you then, what was your, before you went to the prison, what was your initial honest thoughts of prison, the environment, the people maybe in it? How you what did you expect?
I think, like, yeah, for me, you know, you hear some people are in prison, you automatically think, well, they've done something bad.
Scumbags.
Like, they're bad people, they deserve to be in prison, whatever. And I mean, I don't think my sort of perception was quite as savage as that, but, you know, that is it. That's how it's portrayed, with it, that prison is for bad people.
Yeah.
And then since actually going in there, you know, there are so many reasons why someone could end up in prison. Like, it's not because they're a bad person. Like, some people have just never had the opportunity and just maybe don't know that there's other routes. Like, they might be following on from a sibling or a parent, or, you know, a lot of the men have grown up in sort of unfortunate situations that may have led them to this. You know, there's a lot of struggle with mental health. And yeah, ultimately, I think there's so many reasons that can lead someone to going into prison. It's not just that they're a bad person.
Yeah, agreed. There's definitely bad people.
Yeah.
But I think that perception of just putting them behind the door, I mean, there's a lot of things going on now about giving them longer sentences, giving us longer sentences without any more productive time, and it's, like you said, there is 101 reasons why. Sorry, that's all right. There's 101 reasons why people end up in prison.
Yeah.
You know, I've been through the care system myself, and whilst I think I knew better, I still made the wrong decisions. If you come from that background, and generally there's a higher proportion of people that come from a higher poverty background, you can't expect that person who's all they've seen is crime or grown up on an estate, been surrounded by poverty, don't have any money, to then be like, well, I'm happy to live with no money, or and only see people committing crime to then have the sort of know-how to go and do a degree or go and work, or it just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I think that was another one of the sort of like shocks for me. Like, you know, I've grown up in a very privileged situation, like a very sort of stable home. You know, I've had sort of a lot of opportunities and stuff like that, and that is definitely not the case for everyone, and that's not the case for a lot of the men that I've met. A lot of them, yeah, like you said, have grown up without having the opportunity to have these things. Like, they don't know a different path. They haven't been given, you know, the support that they might need to go on to university or to carry on at school, like to behave well and things like that. And yeah, I think, like, you know, quite a few of the men have said that once they get out, they need to just take themselves away from, you know, where they're living, what their situation is, but at the same time, they don't have the resources to necessarily do that.
100%.
So a lot of them are gonna, you know, will be going back to the areas that they're from, surrounded by the people that have potentially, you know, aided them to be in these situations.
Yeah, agreed.
And yeah, I think a big part of it is also like the sort of financial aspect of it.
Yeah, I think so. If I can just touch on, you said about the psychiatric hospital and your journey, if you don't mind me asking, is how that looked like, the mental health kind of you suffered, and how you've kind of got to the position where you are now, which from an outside looking in and briefly speaking to you before we started and watching you on socials, you seem in a much better place from where you could have possibly been.
Yeah.
I was at a remand prison and come across a lot of people in psychosis or in the mental health part of the hospital, and I know the support weren't there. How did that look for you, and what was your kind of journey with that?
So for me, I sort of noticed that things sort of weren't quite right when I was probably about 14.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I sort of started engaging in not so sort of beneficial behaviours.
Yeah.
And for a while it was kind of just like, oh, maybe I'm just not feeling great or whatever. It wasn't a big thing, like I didn't really take much notice of it. And then it was probably around when I was about 17 when I really started to notice that I was like, right, things aren't right, like my mood is not okay. The sort of behaviours that I was engaging in, I was like, this isn't normal sort of behaviour. You know, the first thing I did, I went to my GP about it. And I think for them a big option is like, right, here's some tablets.
100%.
Take them.
It's a go-to.
Like, crack on.
Yeah.
You know, take the tablets and they wouldn't be doing anything, go back to the GP, let's just up your dose.
Yeah.
Like, instead of being like, oh, have you tried, you know, offering like therapy and things like that, it was more just like, here's some meds, off you go.
See you later.
And yeah, nothing was really changing. I would have like good days and good periods, but then like the bad periods weren't just like a slight drop in mood, it was like a severe drop in mood. And like I'd really struggled with that. And then as I got older, nothing seemed to be helping. Like I tried a bit of therapy, but it wasn't working for me. There was something missing. So then I was in a very fortunate situation at the time that through my dad's work I had access to private healthcare, which even now I know is such a privilege to be able to have. And through that I met my psychiatrist, and straight away like complete change of medication, because a big thing for me was it wasn't so much what was going on in my environment, because like I said before, I've had a lovely upbringing, great friendships, great relationships. It was almost just like the chemical imbalance was there. And so there's a big change of medication, and that was also when I was first admitted into hospital.
So this is the worst point now? Yeah.
This was probably when things really started to dip. And that itself was a strange thing. It was strange for me, it was strange for my parents. Like, they definitely weren't sure how to go about it.
Did it take them by surprise, or were they kind of aware?
They knew what was going on for sure. And like they were massive supports in it all. Like they were really there to support me, but I don't think they didn't know either, like how to help. So I think when my psychiatrist was like, right, you need to go into hospital, that was like mad for all of us. And that was my first time in, so I think that was when I was 22.
So how was that moment when you walk in? Because I'm presuming it's pretty similar to a prison. When you first walk in, how, in terms of restrictive, and how's that feeling feel?
You go in and, you know, you take in what you can. You know, you're allowed to take in a few like clothes and bits and pieces you're allowed to take in. Everything's searched. You know, you give a urine sample, like have a health check, like a medical, and then you know, you're sort of shown where everything is, the kitchen, all of that. You meet like your key nurse, but everything is so sort of just little things, you know, like in your wardrobe there's no rail, or in the bathrooms there's no like actual taps, it's all just push buttons, and there's no proper door handles or anything. So it's all of these things that I wouldn't have even sort of considered, I started noticing.
Thinking about.
And I think the biggest part was like meeting other people that were in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
I think for a while I wanted to just go in, put my head down and not engage with anyone. Like I just wanted to crack on and just do my own thing. But you do end up meeting people. It's regardless, you know, you go for a smoke, there's going to be other people there. And the therapy that we engaged in the hospital, a lot of it was group therapy. Which for me, I didn't find very helpful, just because you're sat hearing about other people's traumas and triggers, which can be quite triggering for yourself. I guess it can go either way. Like you could either feel sort of confident in the fact that other people are feeling these things, or you could feel completely sort of, it could just make you feel even worse. And you know, I did meet some really nice people in hospital. But again, I think it's one of those things that you kind of have to be careful, because you don't want to end up being someone's like
crutch.
You've got
your own shit going on.
Exactly, like you don't want to feel like you're responsible for somebody else, or you know, a lot of conversations are sort of had amongst patients that, looking back on them now, I'm like, those were weird conversations that you'd have with each other, and it was kind of just a sign of how unwell a lot of us were. So that, my first time there, I think it was 4 weeks.
Just for the listeners, is that voluntary or is that?
Yeah, that was a voluntary admission. And after 4 weeks, I left. Things hadn't really improved. Obviously, my medication had changed, and that had helped to some degree. But then I think I was kind of stuck in a cycle, like the sort of behaviours that I was engaging in to cope became more, like I started to rely on more and more and more. I think, I can't remember how long it was until my next admission, but from there it just kind of kept happening.
So that revolving door you spoke about? In, out.
And I think one of the biggest problems was, you know, there were a few times whilst I was there and I almost got too comfortable there, in the sense that I was like, right, I'm back in hospital now, I can somewhat relax, like I don't have to be scared of what I might do to myself because I'm being watched. Like, did you feel a bit institutionalised? Was that the right word? Massively. It almost became more scary, the idea of leaving the hospital, than it was going into the hospital. Which is kind of messed up in itself, really. And I think, you know, there were a few times where I was on a one-to-one watch, and I mean that was horrible, because that's like a complete invasion in your privacy. Like, you can't go to the toilet, you can't shower without someone. Do you want to explain it? Because I know what it is in prison. I'm pretty sure it's not for me personally, but I've seen people on one-to-one. What does that, is that someone looking through your door 24 hours a day? That's someone sat in your room like 24/7. You know, everywhere you go, and they have to stay within like a certain distance to you. Sort of, ultimately they're there to stop you from doing anything harmful to yourself. Like a suicide prevention. And, you know, at the time I hated it. I was so rude to my one-to-one. Like, looking back on it now, like, I was not a nice person. But I think, it doesn't justify it, but I was also I think I was so unwell that... He's going through your shit. Anyone that was trying to help me, I was like, I don't want help, like, I don't need help. But yeah, the times that on being on one-to-one was, I think, the worst sort of experiences that I've had, because like I said, like having to go to the toilet in front of someone, it's just having those sort of like that privacy completely taken away from you. It almost feels like you're going back to being a child. Instead of being, I was an adult, I was in my mid-20s, and having someone literally have to babysit you because you're a danger to yourself. It's quite demoralising in a way. But again, looking back on it now, that's what I needed at the time.
Do you respect that decision they took then now, as opposed to how you felt about it then?
Oh, massively. Like every decision that was made back then, I think at the time I was like, oh, you're being dramatic. You're doing this. Like everyone's out to get me. All of that. I look back on it now, and I'm like, all those people in that situation were all looking out for me. They were doing what was needed at the time to keep me safe, to keep me alive. But it didn't stop some of the behaviours that I was engaging in, because at that point they'd almost become like it'd become an addictive behaviour. And even though I was in hospital, there were still ways around it. There were still ways to engage in it. And it was giving that up. I mean, I don't know if I can say.
Yeah, go into as much detail as you're comfortable to go into.
So self-harm for me, that's basically been sort of ongoing since I was about 14. And then as I got older, it got worse and worse and worse. And then, going into hospital, everything, you've got nothing but like, a couple of felt tips or whatever,
you got nothing
on you. And that was it. It was like, right, so what can I do? Let's see. And again, there was still finding ways to do it. There's still ways of getting things into the hospital, undetected, things like that. And that was probably one of the most challenging things for me, was overcoming that need to harm myself, because that was the thing that I relied on most. That was the thing that I thought was making me feel better the most.
The satisfaction of after you'd done it.
Yeah, exactly. And it didn't feel weird to me. It just felt like it was just what had to be done. And sometimes it would still be, I'd be in a good mood, and I'd still be doing it, because it just becomes such, it was almost scary not to do it. And if, when the wound started to heal, it was almost like a reminder to make new ones, because those ones were fading.
So you need to go again.
And that in itself kept putting me back into the hospital quite a bit, because...
So that was your revolving door, essentially?
Yeah, that was sort of the main reason of me going back in and back out. I think it was ultimately because I didn't know when to stop, I didn't know where to draw the line. And I think the biggest part of it was ultimately that I was a bit of a danger to myself for quite a long time. There was a lot of intrusive thoughts that were just so loud all the time, and that was, I guess, one of the sort of downsides to the hospital, was even though you've got these therapy groups and stuff, there is a lot of time that you just spent on your own, where these thoughts are the only things that you've got in your head. And all you can think of is, the creative ways that you could do it, and things like that. And I think that's because you have just got so much time on your hands that you've got nothing else to sort of think about. And when you're unwell, you're not really thinking about more positive things. You're not thinking about what you're going to do with your life, all of those sort of things, because in your head you don't think that you're going to have any more of a life. And that was sort of the main things going on in my head for a very long time. Whilst I was in the hospital, I'd already been diagnosed with depression. I had an eating disorder. Well, I still do, but I'm in a much better place with it than I was. And then after a few years of being in and out of hospital, I got diagnosed with BPD, which is borderline personality disorder. And a big part of that is to do with not being able to regulate your moods. So you can go from being super, super happy to very quickly just feeling terrible. And there's no sort of like middle ground. So sort of getting those sort of diagnoses.
Did that help, or did it make it worse?
To a degree, like it helped in the sense that it kind of explained why some of these behaviours were happening. But then also it kind of, also feels like, right, so you've checked a few things on a list and this is what you've been given, like this is what you are. It kind of puts you in a box. But at the same time, it was kind of interesting because then it was like, right, let me start looking into this, like, let me start understanding more about why I might be doing these things, why my behaviours might be like this. And yeah, it did give me gave me a better understanding of why I was doing the things that I was doing.
Do you think that helped you put you on a road to sort of where you are now? And
I think so, yeah. And I think a massive part of it as well was eventually finding a good one-to-one therapist. Like, I've been through quite a few of them. Some when I was really unwell, I was like, I don't want to talk to you, like, go away. I would just be very stubborn about it. Or I'd have one session with them and be like, no, don't like them, go away. And then when I had one woman she was so good, like straight away, she just sort of held me accountable for things.
Didn't tell me shit.
No. And that's what I needed, because, there were points where I was just being an absolute bitch and I needed someone to
wind you back in, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. And this woman could do that. So I saw her for probably nearly a year, and she made sense of a lot of things. And we talked about a lot of different things. And then she retired, which was like heartbreaking, because I was like, I found someone now that
it's your crutch almost.
Who was just great. And it took a little while to then find someone else, but when I did again, I think it's so important with therapy that you do find someone that you've got a good relationship with, or someone that can understand you. And it isn't always the case. Like, sometimes some of the therapists that I've had have just wanted to, like, again, just go through that checklist. Whereas, like, actually, when I've done therapy, I just want to talk. Like, I just want to
go off on one
and stuff. As opposed to, like, following, like, a set, like, schedule of how things should be going. And I think, the therapy definitely helped me a lot. It wasn't that I didn't have people in my life that I could talk to already. Like, I talked to my mum and dad about a lot of things. I talked to my boyfriend about a lot. But I think having a therapist, it's like having a brick wall that you can just...
Yeah, it's not necessarily... You can have, I think, 1,000 people talk to you. I've done loads of therapy as a child through children's home and in prison. It took me a year to see one, but it definitely puts you... Once you find the person, which I can definitely relate to, because I had that kind of attitude, it's just like, well, you're not a bit of me.
Yeah.
But really, that's not what they're there for. But you all, at the same time, you need to relate to that person to open up.
Yeah.
And I think it's a massive, massive help.
Yeah.
And I think, do you think that more importance need to be played regards to therapy and mental health and addressing the core issues of
I think so,
why
definitely.
we do what we do?
Because, it's great, here you go, here's some medication. And it really, the medication really does help people. But it's not the, like, be-all and end-all. You can't just give someone a pill and expect things to magically get better. There needs to be the balance of, here's the pill to boost the chemicals that you might need.
Yeah.
But here's someone as well that you can talk to and actually start addressing what's going on.
Yeah.
But there just isn't the resources for it. Like, you know, the amount of the waiting times to get therapy and stuff through the NHS is unbelievable. And the amount of people that could benefit from, you know, immediately getting therapy and the help, like, you know, therapy could save people's lives. Like, having that opportunity to talk to someone could save someone's life. Whereas if you're told that you've got to wait a year before you could speak to someone, like...
What happens within that time?
Yeah, like, you know, okay, things might start to get better, but things could also get so much worse. I think a big part, or especially for me, was at school there was nothing about mental health, or there was no mental health support. Like, my teachers knew that there were things going on, but there was never a conversation about it.
Scared to talk about it.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know if things have changed now, because it was, you know, over 10 years ago since I left school. But yeah, there was nothing. And that just makes you sort of feel as like, when you start feeling some of these weird emotions, you're kind of like, well, what the fuck's going on? Like,
yeah.
And no one's explained anything to you. You kind of have a brief, you know, the word depression and stuff and anxiety kind of gets thrown around.
Yeah, 100%.
But you don't actually know what it is, because no one's ever taught you anything about it.
Or the seriousness of it either, I don't think.
Yeah.
I think I was guilty of that before, of just like, oh, you got depression, get over it.
Yeah.
And it ain't.
No.
It ain't. And my more experience I have with people with mental health and my own mental health, you do realise that it ain't just as simple as...
No.
And people do disregard it. It's like, if you're physically not fit, they want to help you. And they see it and believe it. But if it's mentally, it's just...
The support's not... I think it's getting better, but I think there's still a long way to go.
The conversations are being had now.
Yeah, definitely. Like, people are much more open about it. People are more willing to talk about it. But again, it's just that the support just isn't there. Like, and the money isn't there for it. And yeah, I think that's a big problem as well, as the financial aspect of...
So, taking that to the prison environment, obviously, what do you see the challenges are there? What do you think needs to be done, what ain't being done?
I think...
Not just in your prison you're working, but prison generally.
I think there needs to be more opportunity for the men to talk about these things, whether that's more in, you know, in therapy groups, having the option to have a one-to-one therapist, because, you know, group settings don't suit everybody.
Yeah, not in that environment either.
No. You know, in what's already potentially quite a hostile environment or quite a macho
Yeah, you can't seem to be weak.
Yeah, you can't start having a little cry to yourself or whatever. One of the guys that I met, you know, he was saying how much he just spent crying when he first got sentenced. He was just constantly crying. And he kind of took matters into his own hands and is now sort of on the like on the listener scheme.
Yeah, I've done that as well.
Yeah, which is, you know, it's just great, like, for him that he's been able to sort of do that for himself. But a lot of the men haven't done that, you know. They wouldn't. There's
a bit of a stigma to it as well, I think.
Yeah.
So what's the listener scheme and blah blah blah. But
and I think, you know, I see a lot of evidence of like self-harm, which is I see a lot of evidence of that, and I think again that's a part of not knowing how else to deal with the emotions.
Yeah.
It's the easiest thing to do, to vent or to get out those feelings.
I saw a lot of self-harm.
Yeah.
As well, a lot.
And I think that's the other thing, you know, like, one thing that sort of struck me was, you know, if you're sharing a cell with someone and someone is self-harming in your cell, that is a massive thing to have to witness.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very damaging thing to have to witness, even if in yourself maybe you're more in a more stable place mentally.
Yeah.
But to have to witness someone doing that to themselves, that's going to...
I think it's that environment as well. It becomes the norm. I mean, I saw so much of it. I was a listener and a bio cleaner, so I saw kind of both ends. I saw guys doing it or talking about doing it, and then I used to have to clean it up.
Yeah.
And I think, like you said, just being in that environment kind of breeds more hostility, it breeds more self-harm. It's the only way people listen to you in prison, and I think that's part of some of the reason is to get that attention and help.
I think that's a big part of it, and I kind of feel like that was a similar thing with me. It was like, right, especially to start with, it was like, you know, if you do that to yourself, people might be like, okay,
yeah, it's a physical...
Something's wrong.
Yeah,
something's not
I can
right.
see it.
And yeah, it is like, you know, some people say it's attention seeking or whatever, but it can be, it's more a cry for help.
Yeah.
Like if people can see that you've physically done something to yourself, then they're going to be like, oh, okay, maybe they're not all right at the moment, maybe they're not coping. But it shouldn't have to be like that. It shouldn't have to get to that point before you're offered help.
It's just not the resources, unfortunately.
No.
And I think of the challenge is justifying spending money on prisons where people think, you know, there's people out here that haven't committed crime that need the help, and it's trying to justify and change that public perception of why people need help. It's just as much in prisons as on the outside.
And I think like in the prison as well, like, you know, whether you've been to prison 10 times or whether it's your first time, it's not a normal environment. Like, it's a strange environment, or at least it was like when I first went in. Like, you know, you go in, it's so noisy, it's so bare, it's like, it's a very depressing place.
Yeah, I don't think it's helpful.
And, you know, I feel like you could go in there quite a positive or happy person, and just from that environment, I feel like it could just drain you.
Yeah, and I can relate to that. It does. Everything's negative. Even as men, like I'm still in prison now, all you find yourself doing is moaning, and they make you so needy. Like you have to be so reliant on, can I get this and can I get that and can I do this? But they want you to behave as an adult.
Yeah.
If people actually saw, I think, what goes on, they would be a lot more thing about, because it's just a waste of time. For me personally, giving someone longer time in prison isn't helpful. I'd rather have 2 years of solid, intense things put into place as opposed to doing 6 years in prison.
Yeah.
You get a lot more productive, and in the end, I suppose you get a lot less victims because people wouldn't go through the revolving door, and you wouldn't get that repeated cycle of crime.
And it's, you know, some of the men that come in that have been like sentenced to, I don't know, a month. I'm like, what's the point in that? Like, what's the point in them coming in for a month, like for something relatively minor? I'm like, surely that month in prison is going to do more damage to them potentially than, you know, if they had to do some sort of community service or something on the outside.
100%. And it costs more.
Yeah.
It costs a crazy amount to keep us in prison.
Yeah.
Crazy amount. I suppose on a lighter note, a little bit, is where do you see yourself in 3 years? Where do you want to be in 3 or 4 years' time?
If
you had a magic wand.
I don't know, in the Caribbean somewhere. No, I would like to be still in London.
Yeah.
For a long time we thought we'd move back to Manchester, but now we're pretty set on staying in London. I want to be doing my instructing and...
The PT instructing?
PT, yeah. I mean, I'd love to be able to buy a house.
Yeah.
That's a big goal.
That's the goal, yeah.
That's a big goal. 3 or 4 years might be pushing it, but...
You never know.
That's the goal, to not have to be renting. And yeah, I think... And another dog.
2? 2 Dobbies?
I'd love another Dobby.
Do you think Dobby would get jealous?
Yeah. He's an only child. I don't think he'd be happy with a sibling, but I really want one. But no, my boyfriend probably won't let me. I think he's quite happy with just the one.
Hopefully a second dog then.
But yeah, just, and to be honest, like, just to be
happy,
and not necessarily even happy, but just in sort of some sort of control, and just plodding along. Like, that's all I want for now. Like, just to literally just plod along and just little things at a time.
Do you feel as well the going and doing that prison work almost in a selfish way is helpful because you have a purpose?
Yeah, definitely.
That helps with your own mental health.
Yeah, massively. And it is one of those, like, it is one of those selfish things, because it's like, I'm doing good for other people, but
at the same time for yourself.
At the same time, it's really helped me, and I just really enjoy spending time with the men and just chatting with them. And I think as well, like, going in as, I'm not going in as a therapist or a member of staff. I'm literally just the woman that brings the dog. But it's quite nice just having, like, just chatting to the men just about, normal non-prison stuff.
And I suppose if you had one piece of advice that you could offer people going through mental health struggles in prison, out of prison, wherever, what one thing stuck with you? What kind of one thing's got you through that you could take away?
I think I'll go with two things.
You can have two.
So
you've travelled here.
You don't have to have like a million people to talk to, but if you can just find yourself one person that might just, and not even necessarily a therapist, but just one person that you can offload something to, not even everything to, but just to have like someone that you feel like you can rely on to a degree, not to completely lean on, but someone that you can rely on, just like one good relationship with someone, I think can be hugely beneficial. And the second one for me would be around the self-harm. Like, ultimately that's not going to fix things, and it's so much easier said than done. Just say, well, just stop doing it. Like, it doesn't work like that. But if you can find something else to ultimately take that pain away without inflicting it on yourself, then that's a great start. Like, it will just take you, it's a great thing to be able to stop doing, and it's not an easy thing to stop doing, but just finding something to limit the pain that you're inflicting on yourself is a great way to go.
Essentially finding someone and finding something to get you through.
Yeah, definitely.
Lastly, is there any questions I haven't asked or anything you'd like to comment on, or even ask me, whatever?
Yeah, I think, like, what for you when you first went into prison? What went through your head on those, like, that first night or that first week? Like,
for me, I remember it vividly, and I remember getting arrested. I'm inside for drugs, for just essentially selling drugs, importing drugs. The moment the sirens, I saw them, I knew my whole life had been tipped upside down. I knew my two sons. I was thinking, what are they going to do without me? How's my partner going to cope, who suffers her own mental health? My kid's going to get taken away. And then the first day in the prison, the noise of going on the bus from the courtroom, like you picked up on it about walking into the prison, and the sounds of shouting about everyone away. Twos unlock, like you become a number, you become a product within this environment of, fair enough, you made a decision to be there, but it's not through choice.
No.
And it's that, I think my fear was just, how, why, when's it all going to end? It is a living nightmare for me personally. People that, and there's part of people in the justice system that don't feel like it's a punishment enough to be in prison. They completely don't get it, because like you said, you related it to, you get searched, you have your liberty taken away, they can strip search you anytime, and you do get strip searched. it's the freedom and the fear and leaving your family behind that for me was unthinkable.
Yeah.
But again, you get through it.
Yeah.
And I think as humans, we all learn to cope. I mean, I'm sure when you was in hospital and me in prison, you think, how are you going to get through it? And you do.
Yeah.
You find a way. There's guys that have done 20 years. I'm only doing, when I get out, I've done 4.5, but I think you can always see worse.
Yeah.
And I'm sure at the hospital, I saw people in a worse position. And I kind of used that as my way of getting through it.
Yeah.
Is kind of thinking, well, listen, it could be worse. We're going to be all right. You have your dark days. You definitely do. And I think you live in your head. I heard someone say it on a social media the other day, is that you learn to live in your head and you have to get out of it.
Yeah.
Because all you can do is be in your head. So
that's
I think
like the most dangerous place to be
exactly.
Sometimes.
If you're not aware of your mental health, and I think having unlocked my life for me and the listening scheme enabled me to recognise and see it in other people and use it selfishly again to get through. So for me, that's where I was at.
One other thing,
go for it.
Because obviously there's a very, very extensive list of what you can and can't have in a prison.
Yeah.
What's one home comfort almost, or one thing that you wished you could have with you?
I'll give you two, because there's the materialistic one and then there's the emotional one. Materialistic obviously is your phone.
Yeah.
Because that's contact to everyone. And I think until you have it taken away, like if you try and put your phone away for a day, I think that'd be a good challenge for someone. There's a 24-hour, maybe we could start one.
Yeah.
Put your phone in a drawer for 24 hours and see how you get on. So for me, materialistic is a phone, because you Google, you got watch videos, you can talk to people, it's a whole world.
Yeah.
Emotionally is the kids.
Yeah.
And it's the little things like putting them to bed, and I miss the emotional connection. Being around men all day, being a bloke is just, it's not healthy.
No.
So that's me.
Yeah. With the phone thing, I find that even when I just go into the prison for the morning, I have my phone in.
Oh, I need it back.
And then there's sometimes, and I'm I just want to take a picture of that, and then I'm I'm in a prison, so I can't take pictures. But two, it's almost like you put your hand in your pocket,
looking for it.
It's just not there. So, and that's only for a few hours out of my day.
Yeah, that's crazy.
You do rely on it so much. And even just it's one of those things that you can just use for mindless scrolling, can't you?
But you don't even notice it.
No.
It's just a habit. Also, just have something in your hand that you play with, or. So anything else?
One more thing. There's another charity that I follow that's about to do with food in prison.
Oh, food behind bars, I think it is.
Yeah. What is the food like? Because from what I can see, it doesn't look great.
The prison food, is bollocks. It's terrible. It's garbage. But I tell you what, one thing people won't get is how creative you get in prison. As you've probably seen, people cooking kettles.
Yeah.
So basically, it's a travel kettle with a base. Obviously, in open prison, you've got cooking equipment. CCATs, you've got a bit more equipment. But in a BCAT local, you can buy your bits from canteen and seasonings, and you learn to cook in a kettle. And the go-to protein, I suppose, is tinned mackerel.
Right.
So for me, even now, yesterday, my meal last night, one of the boys made a curried mackerel. That is my go-to. And even released, I will be buying tinned mackerel and cooking mackerel. So that's my a mackerel stewed curry of some sort.
Right.
That's our go-to thing,
Yeah, I think there was one guy who said, I've made a banoffee pie in my kettle. I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah, because they put the tin inside to caramelise. Yeah, it's crazy. The creativity is crazy.
He's like, do you want some? I was like, I'm alright for today. I was like, maybe next time.
Hannah, that brings me to saying thank you so much.
Yeah,
I know you've travelled all the way from London.
Yeah, it's been
it's finally nice to meet you in person.
Yeah.
Really appreciate you being honest and talking about your own past. And hopefully helping others, and people hopefully hear something in that and resonate with it and maybe help them. So I really appreciate it. Dobby, thank you.
Dobbs, come on camera.
So thank you to Dobby as well. I appreciate you coming down.
Yeah, thank you for having us. Very good.
So that brings that episode to a finish. Want to thank Hannah again. You can follow her. The Dobby the Whippet. It's Dobby the Whippet on social, so have a follow. You can see some of the amazing work Hannah does with Dobby, also just day-to-day stuff.
Thank you so much.
Anna, thank you so much. Thanks for listening. You have been listening to the Mental Health and Justice podcast. We'll see you next week.